my superstar panel of Conservative commentator Dominic Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole think? I'll find out at 10 p.m. As London's failed Mayor Sadiq Khan calls for a return to the single market, isn't it time the UK face up to the fact that a vote for Labour and arch Ramona Sir Keir Starmer means a vote to return to the EU? I'll explain we mustn't countenance a government prepared to ignore the democratic will of the people in my digest next. Plus, as slippery Starmer disowns his predecessor's manifesto and, quote, starts from scratch, will Labour ever successfully rid themselves of the spectre of Corbyn? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe weighs in on that at 9:40. As Meghan makes another bid to enter US Liberal politics, should Buckingham Palace be forced to release the results of her buried bullying probe? I'll debate this shocking Sussex censorship with P. Diner, the American royal YouTuber and actress who is an outspoken critic of Harry and Meghan and a confidant of Thomas Markle. Plus, find out what happened when she and one of my own producers had a fiery run-in with a Meghan-supporting member of the public.
Come over here telling me what I need to do because you're offended.
What's me calling her a social harm got her to do with her race?
You're right there.
You would say that because you're a victim in chief.
Honestly, the full footage of that confrontation has to be seen to be believed. I'll play it for you at 9:50. Now, do you remember Alex Mitchell? He's the brave Scotsman who developed blood clots so severe after the AstraZeneca jab, he was forced to have his leg amputated. Well, weeks after this show gave him a platform to share his story, he's become the first victim of a rare vaccine-induced condition to win payment from the government's vaccine damages scheme. We'll discuss his landmark victory and continue the call for justice for those lost victims of the vaccine. That's at Uncancelled at 10:40. Do parents deserve to know what their kids are being taught about sex and race in school? The indomitable Dame Jenny Murray, columnist and former host of Women's Hour, certainly thinks so. She sits down with me live at 10:15. As the majority of Scots reject next year's illegal referendum, is the party over for Nicola Sturgeon's SNP? Scottish editor of the Daily Telegraph, Alan Cochrane, who's written a scathing takedown of the First Minister, and Austin Sheridan, the former SNP councillor for Glasgow City, battle it out in the clash at 9:25. I want your thoughts too. Plus, should the co-creator of Friends have apologised for the hit show's lack of diversity? And as an Australian critic of our Emma Raducanu slams her nonplussed reaction to losing Wimbledon, is this really proof that Gen Z has been conditioned to just accept failure? We'll get into all of that in the media buzz throughout the 10 hour. And is the Speaker of the House a Greatest Briton or a Union Jackass contender after sparking today's baby ban in the Commons? We'll find out at 10:50. Tomorrow's newspaper front pages are coming up hot off the press throughout the show too, so you don't want to go anywhere. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. I know I'm not the only one who's felt utterly aggrieved for J.K. Rowling after the way her Harry Potter stars have treated her in recent times. Tom Felton, who plays Draco Malfoy, was the latest Potter protégé to refuse to acknowledge her existence this week with the helping hand of a simply ridiculous PR look.
J.K. obviously has a sort of more of a backseat now. Is it strange, kind of her not being around at things like this?
Next question, please.
Oh, okay.
That clip rightly went viral online, and a third-party PR firm handling the interview later said it was not, quote, relevant to ask about the Harry Potter offer. But there's been some good news since. The Hollywood wokesters at Warner Brothers were today forced into backing JK after admitting they were, quote, wholly wrong to stop Felton answering the question. So they said in a statement, Warner Brothers has enjoyed a creative, productive and fulfilling partnership with J.K. Rowling for the past 20 years. She is one of the world's most accomplished storytellers, and we are proud to be the studio to bring her vision, characters and stories to life, and for decades to come. On Monday, a statement was issued by a third-party media agency that appeared contrary to this view. The statement was wholly wrong, and Warner Brothers Studio Tour London regrets it happened as part of a media event that day. So maybe now, these ungrateful, multi-millionaire wokester actors who J.K. Rowling created with her unrivalled talent and imagination, will feel more inclined to show some thanks in the future. I'm looking at you, Emma Watson. I'm looking at you, Daniel Radcliffe. But I don't have high hopes. My superstar panel are going to weigh in very shortly. Let's take a first look at them. The political commentator Dominique Samuel's back tonight alongside the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. But before I catch up with them, the news headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Dan, thank you, and good evening from the GB newsroom. The government's Deputy Chief Whip has resigned following a drunken incident. In a letter to the Prime Minister, Christopher Pincher said, "Last night I drank far too much. I've embarrassed myself and others, which is the last thing I want to do, and for that I apologise to you and to those concerned. I think the right thing to do in the circumstances is for me to resign. I owe it to you and the people I've caused upset to do this." Well, the Prime Minister has promised to increase defence spending by £55 billion for the rest of the decade. Boris Johnson says increasing the budget to 2.5% of GDP is in response to the threat posed by Russia. The UK also announced an extra £1 billion in military aid to help Ukraine. A 14-year-old boy who has been sentenced to 15 years in prison for murdering his stepbrother has been named as Craig Mulligan. 5-year-old Logan Mwangi's body was found in the River Ogmore in Bridgend in July last year. His mother, Angharad Williamson, and stepfather John Cole were also found guilty and jailed for life. They'll serve minimum terms of 28 and 29 years, respectively. Detective Inspector Leanne Rees says the sentences have delivered justice for Logan's father.
It's incomprehensible that Logan had his life cut short in such tragic circumstances at the hands of those very people who should have been there to protect him. For Logan's father, Ben, who stands beside me, today's sentences are welcome news. However, no amount of justice can bring Logan back or compensate for the grief that continues to be felt.
A court has heard how her father crushed his daughter to death by driving over her body twice amid a family breakup. Prosecutors told Norwich Crown Court that Nigel Moult was totally consumed with anger when he killed 19-year-old Lauren outside the family home in Norfolk in January. Moult, who was estranged from his wife and children, lived at a different address. The prosecutor described how Moult's relationships were marred by drugs and alcohol. The trial is due to last for 2 weeks. Airline passengers have hit out at the total chaos at Heathrow after the airport ordered 30 flights to be cancelled during the morning peak. The rare schedule intervention came as the airport struggled with passenger numbers, with some travellers only finding out their flights were cancelled when they arrived at the airport. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked onto alternative flights. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
You think the issue of Brexit is settled under a potential Labour government? Like hell it is. And a Starmer-led administration propped up by the Lib Dems, the SNP and the Greens. Well, I'll tell you what's settled in that coalition from hell scenario. The biggest democratic mandate in British history will almost certainly be overturned. Listen to Labour's failed London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, proudly boasting about what his party really feel about Brexit just this week.
Should the Labour Party at a national level be agitating for rejoining the single market?
I believe we should. Spot on. Worse, that's the biggest piece of self-inflicted harm ever done to a country, leaving the European Union.
Then there's Labour's Shadow Justice Secretary, Anna McMorran, who was recorded making the jaw-dropping admission that the party getting back into office would allow them to renegotiate a closer deal with Brussels and even rejoin the EU.
Which was, could we ever return to the EU single market?
I hope so. Getting into government, there might be some scope then to renegotiate. We certainly need to renegotiate the current deal, certainly. And I hope eventually that we will get back into the single market and customs union, and who knows in the future then.
Who knows? That's before we even get to Starmer himself, who expects the British public is so stupid that we forget he led the drive to thwart democracy and hold a second referendum that would tear the country apart.
Our options must include campaigning for a public vote, and nobody is ruling out Remain as an option. We've agreed that it must be subject to another referendum.
Let's try it out now. So the Tories say, we're out. The Lib Dems say, we're staying. Labour says,
if you vote for Labour, the public will decide in a referendum. And there's now only one way. Whether in this government or the next, put it to the people.
Will the Labour front bench actually be putting down an amendment for a referendum and then vote for it?
I think it's more likely that it'll come from the backbench, because almost every victory we've had...
Will Labour back it then?
Yes. There's only one way to solve this. This has to go back to the people. And Labour says, let's get it away from the politicians, put it back to the public. Yeah. But Labour's position, 3 sentences, get a better deal than his, put it up against Remain in a referendum, and do that within 6 months.
So that's Labour, folks. Pretty clear where they're at. But when it comes to the Lib Dems, Ed Davey doesn't want to say it publicly, but he will absolutely take us back into the EU without even a form of public vote.
The EU single market, do you want to take the UK back into that?
We're not talking about that now.
But you talked about that at your spring conference. Is that where you want to go?
Well, we believe that if you're going to improve our economy, if you're going to get Britain moving again, you need a plan. And that plan
is that the EU?
Well, I think the EU doesn't want to talk to Britain at the moment. We need a plan.
And is that plan, I still don't understand, is that plan still for you? Is your policy still to go back into the EU single market as the Liberal Democrats? Because that's what you will be campaigning on in the next general election, if it is.
Before you can even think of that, you need to improve our relations with Europe.
And is that what you will be campaigning for in the next general election, going back into the EU single market and free movement of people?
Well, I'm not going to write the manifesto now, Sophie. I'm sorry.
Translation, yes. And we all know about scheming Sturgeon's EU obsession.
The Conservatives have just 6 MPs in Scotland, barely 10% of Scottish representation. And yet they have ripped us out of the EU against our will. Now the only route for Scotland back into the European Union and to the European family of nations is by becoming an independent country.
So there's all the evidence. It's about time we start stating the facts. Voting for Labour at the next election means voting to rejoin the EU. It will start with the single market, and while I concede it will take time, it will end with full membership. We cannot afford a government that doesn't fundamentally believe in our own independence. We cannot afford a government that is prepared to ignore the democratic will of the people. Remember, Sturgeon in Scotland now believes just 9 years represents a generation when it comes to Scottish independence. So by those calculations, that would mean another EU referendum by 2025. So the facts are clear, the evidence is unequivocal. It's only the Tories in Parliament who genuinely believe in Brexit. So many of the attempts to get rid of Boris Johnson comes down to that, and actually nothing else, even though the political parties and the mainstream media don't want to tell you that. So while I do appreciate how tough things are at the moment for Boris and for the Tory party, I do think it's important we don't forget about the bigger picture. Because mark my words, under a Labour government, Brexit is under threat. To respond now, my superstar panel, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Dominique, they're barely hiding it anymore.
I think this just goes to show that you can't trust Labour, especially when it comes to respecting democratic votes. The mandate for leaving the European Union has been and gone. The debate is over. And I think what certain people can't...
But not for them, it's not.
what certain people can't accept is, yes, of course, leaving the European Union is going to have an impact on our economy, but are we forgetting the global pandemic that has caused issues for every single country in the world effectively? They want to gloss over that. They want to make make nothing into something and try and rehash old wounds. And I think what they're seeking is division, because that's the only thing that
there's no Brexit in Australia, where I've just been, and it costs $11. That's about £5 to buy one lettuce at the moment. There's no Brexit there, so I completely agree with that point.
Something that you're all completely glossing over. The people no longer believe in Brexit. Currently, only 17%...
Oh, where's the proof of that, Amy?
Only 17% of people currently are happy with the way the Brexit deal is going. We're losing billions. We have, for next year, the predicted growth...
So do you just propose overturning the referendum?
The only country that is underneath us is Russia, and...
Do you just propose overturning the referendum, though?
No. No, I don't. And also, I think...
So what, do you want a second referendum?
It's incredibly misleading when you're saying that rejoining the single market is undermining Brexit, because it's completely not. There are plenty of countries that are not in the EU, that are in the single market. Iceland, Norway...
It's not true. They're not in the single market. They have a special deal. Let's make this clear. There's some very important things happening there. There will be no deal for the single market. Let's go back to when David Cameron went to Europe and said, can we have a deal? And they sent him home with nothing. That's why we...
And they knew what was at stake at that point.
And that's why we had the referendum. So the idea that there'll be some kind of magic golden deal just because it's the Labour Party, simply not...
Sean, you ran against Sadiq Khan to be London Mayor. You lost, but you lost far more narrowly than anyone was expecting, and he is a failed mayor, we know that. Why do you think he is taking this position, which now puts him at odds publicly with Keir Starmer on Brexit? Is this his play to become Labour Party leader?
I think there's two things at play here. Firstly, he was on full Sadiq mode. He was in a very smug mode and firing from the hip.
Been interviewed by James O'Brien, so it's no surprise. They're pals, aren't they?
He was getting an easy ride. He started firing from the hip, because what it did yesterday is made sure he can never be leader of the Labour Party. Because if he was to be leader of the Labour Party, everybody, particularly outside of London, who voted for Brexit would be horrified. They just wouldn't support him. It'd be just another reason for the rest of the country not to support him. But more importantly, he is constantly... Look, the important bit about me getting so close is that he had to go to the Lib Dems and the Greens and beg them for their votes. So now he's pandering to a London crowd. But I'd say two things. If you're Lib Dem or Green, vote Lib Dem or Green. Don't vote for Sadiq Khan. Vote for what you actually want. And I think he's treating the left-wing vote as if he owns it, and he's pursuing it in that way. But most importantly, it's a lack of respect. If you're the Mayor of London, you have to represent everyone. And when the public have spoken, you have to respond to that.
I think
you've got to respect democracy.
I think you are completely right that the Red Wall was lost down to the fact that there were a large proportion that overwhelmingly voted for Brexit in those seats. But that was then, and in hindsight...
Doesn't mean democracy can be reversed, Amy. Democracy is democracy.
Hold on. Let's take...
And there are 1.2 million people who voted for Brexit who regret voting for Brexit because of what's happened. This should be a vote winner, because we need
Let me just say this.
We need to help ourselves.
Our economy is in better condition than most of our European economies.
No, it isn't.
Because of our fundamentals, and that's a fact. But you know the real reason why people should stick to their Brexit guns? When the Remainers were trying to make you say, they told you that you're a woman and you were stupid. They told you you were black and that you were racist. They told you that you were emotional and you didn't know what you're doing. Even Sadiq Khan used the word self-harm. That would suggest that you're stupid for doing what you wanted to do. If a politician ever tells you you're wrong, if you're wrong, do what you want to do, because that politician doesn't know how you do it.
And Dominique, look, I know things are against the Tory party at the moment, right? I support Boris Johnson, but even I can see that. But don't you think it's important that we start talking about some of these bigger picture issues now? Because if Keir Starmer is Prime Minister, regardless of what he says about respecting the Brexit vote now, he cannot be trusted on that front. He's got a front bencher who says she wants to rejoin the single market, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. She hasn't been sacked, Dominique. She hasn't been disciplined. We know what Labour actually want to do.
I understand that about Labour, but I think for Boris Johnson, if he wants to attain some sort of political capital, I think that he should probably listen to these concerns and actually start talking about how he's going to take advantage of Brexit in light of our economic circumstances. And I just don't think the government is doing that enough. Even with regards to the Bank of England and it being too slow to raise interest rates comparative to
let's not be embarrassed about Brexit.
Let's be proud of it.
Can you tell me if you're proud of Brexit?
The European Union isn't in a perfect position economically by any stretch. Their money printing, which obviously raises inflation rates, equates to 83%.
Of course. And by the way, Amy, I'll give you the final word, but let me just tell you, and this is a fact, the economic issues, the supply chain issues, which are taking place all around the world, in China, in Australia, in the US, they are down to 2 years of lockdown. There's nothing to do with Brexit.
I understand that, but they're 7%, we're 9%. Anyway, my last word is I want you each to say one benefit of Brexit.
I'll tell you straight away. I'll give you three.
That don't count.
I'll give you three. We're in charge of our own borders. We're in charge of our own laws.
Well, that's working out.
Since Brexit, the Secretary for Trade has signed 62 bilateral trade deals, and that's the last time I checked. That's the benefit of Brexit.
Can you tell me something that will affect me? Because I know
our laws.
That Brexit, on average, will cost you £3,000 each household. It will cost you £3,000. Something that affects me. Tell me how I've benefited from Brexit.
I'll tell you how you benefit. All these things that people are telling you, as if
Sean's telling you.
Brexit.
No, trade. I don't know.
Schooling you on Brexit.
No, we do Pokemon cards. Like, tell me something about me.
I'll tell you, right? All of these things they tell you about Brexit, they act like if we were inside the European Union, we'd be devoid of economy. These things happen to nations.
And I'll tell you what, Amy, your vote matters now. Your vote in the UK matters now because our laws are decided in Westminster, not in Brussels, by faceless EU bureaucrats who don't want what's best for this country.
Unelected.
And we get a blue pass.
Amy Nicole.
So,
Sean Bailey.
Can't use it though, can we?
Dominic Sammers. Oh my goodness, I love my blue passport. Coming up, as Starmer claims he's ditching his predecessor's socialist manifesto, will Labour ever successfully rid themselves of Comrade Corbyn? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe weighs in at 9:40. But first in the clash, as the majority of the Scots reject next year's illegal Indy Ref 2, is the party over for Nicola Sturgeon's SNP? Our all-Scottish lineup get ready to do battle next. Let me know what you think. Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle gbnews. We have our poll running there. You can vote now. I'll bring you the results after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And Anne Widdecombe and outspoken Meghan Markle critic and top American YouTuber Pete Diner still to come this hour. But first, it's time for The Clash. Now, a damning new poll has revealed that over half of Scots don't want another independence referendum. The bombshell survey by the Scotsman asked whether a vote should take place next October, with 53% of people saying no, 40% replying yes, and the remainder undecided. On Tuesday, of course, Scheming Sturgeon announced she will pander to her craven SNP base and push ahead with a second divisive and costly ballot, even if Westminster refuses to allow it.
It does transpire that there is no lawful way for this Parliament to give the people of Scotland the choice of independence in a referendum, and if the UK Government continues to deny a Section 30 order, my party will fight the UK general election on this single question: should Scotland be an independent country?
The illegal vanity project comes at the expense of average Scots who more than ever need a government that tackles real issues, with Police Scotland today announcing a 50-year high in sex crimes. But voters are starting to wake up and realise that not only does the First Minister not give a toss about them, her rotten SNP, mired in a nasty series of sleazy and bullying scandals, is crumbling from the inside. As former Scottish editor and current columnist for the Daily Telegraph, Alan Cochrane, writes, her once Democratic Party has become a one-woman show, with Sturgeon controlling everything yet squandering the power she's amassed. So, with opinion polls showing the Nationalist numbers dwindling, is the party over for Scheming Sturgeon? That's our question tonight. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet your thoughts to GB News. We've got our poll running there too. But weighing in on this now is the Dundee-born editor of the day, former Scottish editor of the Daily Telegraph himself, Alan Cochrane, and the former SNP Glasgow City Councillor, Austin Sheridan. So, Alan, I'm so grateful that you're here, because I read your column and I just thought it summed up the position of what's happened to Sturgeon so succinctly and brilliantly from a Scottish perspective. So can you just explain why you think she's got to this position?
Well, I think she almost explained it herself with her statement about how she's going to try and rebuild the bedrock of her party, who are completely fed up with her not producing what she's always promised them, an independent country. But, I mean, so what she's done with this astonishing, and I'll take my hat off to her, it was a surprise, she's actually going to take her plan to the Supreme Court, the most senior court in the land, and ask them, am I trying to do something illegal? Now, it's a bizarre thing for a politician to be doing. We expected, we poor hacks in the Scottish Parliament and watching the Scottish Parliament, thought she would ask her senior law officer, the Lord Advocate, to rule on that. But instead of that, she's taken it to the Supreme Court. I think, as do a lot of people, that she knows what the Lord Advocate would have said. Sorry, sunshine, you can't do it. So if she then gets a no from the Supreme Court, she's not finished. She's got another trick up her sleeve to help our activists, and that's what she says in a one-issue general election. Now, you're too young, and I'm certainly not too young to remember 1970 when Ted Heath tried a single-issue election, when he said during a fight with the miners, "Who runs Britain?" And the British people said, "Not you, sunshine." And she cannot decide to have an election on one issue. We decide, we the people decide what elections are about, not politicians.
Well, especially given all of the problems in Scotland. So Alan, you think fundamentally the party's over for the SNP?
I think the party's over, and but the proof will be in the pudding when she fails in both of these attempts. She will get, I suspect, a no from the Supreme Court. And if she does try and have a one-issue election, we don't even know how she's going to judge it. Is it going to be on numbers of votes, numbers of street seats, or both, or a mix of all two? It's a complete mess. It's coming apart at the seams. So I think she's got a double whammy coming her way.
Austin Sheridan, why do you say the party isn't over for the SNP after that brilliant analysis from Alan Cochrane?
Alan set out the stall to precisely showing how Nicola Sturgeon will give the Scottish people an outlet and a say over Scotland's future. Well, the one thing I would clarify for Alan is it's been stated that over 50% of the votes casted in a general election would be what would be needed to get a majority, not the number of seats.
Yeah, but you sure about that, Austin? Because John Swinney, her deputy, has said it was both. And then he changed his mind.
John Swinney clarified that, but I would make the presumption in a first past the post system that if you get over 50% of the vote, we're going to have the most, if not all, of the seats anyway. But yeah,
but right now, Austin, in Scotland, there is no SNP majority. You're being propped up by Green extremists.
There's a pro-independence majority in the Scottish Parliament, and there is a unionist minority. If the Unionists had a majority in the Scottish Parliament, then I would have to accept that as a Democrat and accept that a referendum isn't what the people of Scotland wanted. But the reality is, the people of Scotland have voted for a pro-independence Parliament. Nicola Sturgeon has set out stages where the people of Scotland can have their say in a legal manner, because no illegal option is going to be pursued. That's exactly why she's going to the
she knows
Court.
it's illegal. She knows it's illegal.
I'll be honest, and she exceeded my expectations on the path forward, and I thought it was a masterstroke.
Yeah, well, of course you did. Of course you did, because you want Sturgeon to be president. Alan, how do you respond?
That fresh face tells me he wasn't around at the last referendum, and if you were, how did you vote then? But the point about the last referendum, it was 8 years ago. Why should we have another one? Dan's just been discussing the Brexit referendum. Does anyone, well, you might be right, maybe the Remainers do want another referendum on Brexit, but I'm sure Dan doesn't want them to have it, nor do most people want them to have it. And I don't want to refight this 2014 independence referendum. I thought it was a very nasty, divisive affair. It caused a lot of scars, and we don't want to go through that again. And there's no need to go through it again.
No.
We had an 11%.
I mean, Austin, why do you want to put the country through this?
The reason that unionists, right, don't want to talk about, the key points or the benefits of the union is because they know that it's going to be very difficult.
Well, what are the benefits? What are the benefits? I mean, there's a £3.5 billion budget deficit for Scotland. You're not going to be able to join the EU. Spain will veto your membership. What's going to be your currency, Austin? Because right now, Nicola Sturgeon is living in a delusional fantasy world that you're going to be able to keep the pound. Well, if you want EU membership, it's going to have to be the EU. Answer me those questions.
If the unionists believe the argument is so strong for the union, why are they shying away from allowing the people of Scotland to decide? And when
I'll tell you why. No, Austin, you've just asked a question. I will tell you why. Because when the last referendum took place, the SNP itself, your people, said this was a once-in-a-generation vote. You accepted that. Now, since when is a generation 9 years? Yeah, Alan, you come in. Let Alan come in and then I'll get you to respond.
Nicola Sturgeon said, not once she said once in a lifetime. Now, the last time I looked at Nicola Sturgeon, she looked hale and hearty. She said, once in a lifetime opportunity. They had it in 2014. Good night, Vienna.
Austin?
It's not up to one politician to decide the fate of a country moving forward, no matter what they say. The point that matters here is the people of Scotland voted for a second independence referendum. Now, what would happen in the scenario that England send a majority of Westminster MPs that's voted independence? What permission would they need under the Good Friday Belfast Agreement? It's written into international law, an international agreement, that if there is a shift and change that's demonstrable, then they would be allowed to have a border poll, and it stipulates that they could only have one after 7 years has elapsed. Now, 8 years has elapsed for Scotland. It would be 9 years come October. There has been a clear demonstration in Scotland from the Scottish people who have elected the Scottish Parliament that they wanted a referendum. How can Westminster justify turning around and saying no?
Alan, isn't one of the issues, though, that at the last Scottish election, Alan, Sturgeon actually said this isn't a vote about independence. She encouraged unionists to vote for her.
I mean, she didn't want to talk about it. Everybody else wanted to talk about it, but she had to keep quiet about it. Come on, you must have heard. Well, give me an occasion when she mentioned a referendum during the last election.
Well, we do want to talk about it, and it was in our manifesto, and it was clear that if we got a parliamentary majority in favour of independence, and then we would go ahead and have it. If you look at the regional list vote, if you add up the pro-independence parties on the regional list votes across Scotland, over 50% of people who voted in favour.
OK, so Austin, I'm going to give you the final word, Austin, but what do you make of this new Scotsman poll that shows only 40% of Scots want a second referendum? It's game over, isn't it?
Well, the only poll that matters is elections, and people voted in an election to give politicians the mandate to hold a referendum.
Unless it's a once-in-a-lifetime vote in 2014, and then it doesn't matter at all. Thank you so much. That was Dundee-born former Scottish editor of the Daily Telegraph, Alan Cochrane. Really recommend you read his brilliant column. And former SNP Glasgow City Councillor Austin Sheridan. So who do you agree with on this? Is the party over for scheming Sturgeon's SNP? Well, Roddy on Twitter says Sturgeon wants to leave the UK and stop being controlled by Westminster, but at the same time wants to be controlled by Brussels and the EU. That's not independence. From Sean, scheming Sturgeon never asked the public if they wanted another referendum, so she went behind their backs. She is a holier-than-thou attention seeker. And from Alan on email, the Tories are done in Scotland, you mean. NDREF 2 will be a wipeout for the Conservatives. And your verdict is now in. 90% of you agree that the party is over for Sturgeon's SNP. Just 10% of you say it isn't. Coming up, as Meghan makes another bid to enter US Liberal politics, should Buckingham Palace be forced to release the results of her buried bullying probe? I speak to P. Diner, the American royal YouTuber and actress who is an outspoken critic of the Sussexes and a confidant of Thomas Markle. I'll also bring you the extraordinary encounter she and my GB News producer had with a Meghan fan on the train. Honestly, you've got to see it to believe it, so don't go anywhere. But first, as Starmer tries to put distance between himself and Corbyn by announcing he is starting from scratch, will Labour ever get rid of the ghost of Jezza? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe, here next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Dame Jenny Murray on the way, but it's time now for big, witty styling. Keir Starmer has risked infuriating Labour's hard left and the party's union overlords by disowning Jeremy Corbyn's 2017 Socialist Manifesto. Only 2 years ago, Starmer described it as a, quote, foundational document and praised its, quote, radicalism. But in an attempt to distance himself from the party's now banished ex-leader, he told a New Statesman magazine event that a whole new manifesto is in the works.
What we've done with the last manifesto is put it to one side. We're starting from scratch. The slate is wiped clean. We've got a policy review going on at the moment. Annalisa Dodds is leading that for us in consultation with our members and with our trade unions.
But with rebellious Labour frontbenchers escaping punishment for joining RMT picket lines and superficial Starmer too terrified to take a firm position on the strikes, it seems the party is as beholden to the far left as ever. And Widdicombe, will Labour ever successfully rid themselves of the spectre of Corbyn? Because even though Starmer wants to pretend he can have a fresh start, Corbyn acolytes, and they're everywhere in Labour.
Indeed, and if you actually consider it, Corbyn is simply the latest manifestation of this. We had Michael Foot in the 80s, we then had Neil Kinnock, and it took Labour a very long time to realise that even if the country was fed up with the Tories, as it was in 1992, for example, it wanted their agenda. It didn't want the socialist agenda. Blair understood that, and he therefore adopted Tory light, basically. Said he wouldn't renationalise everything that we'd privatise. Indeed, he went on and did his own privatisations. He took our agenda forward. And all the time that he was winning, the left was silenced because they had lost for 18 long years and suddenly they'd won. And all the time he was winning, they were silenced. And I said many times that when he started losing, that was when the left would resurface because their agenda had never gone away. It was just lying dormant while they could keep themselves in power. And as soon as they were out of power, the inevitable happened. The quite inevitable happened. So I don't think they're ever going to get rid of their left wing. The problem for Labour is that the agenda of the left wing is now just hopelessly out of date. You know, it's redundant. It was something that you might well have applied when Labour was formed and working conditions were terrible. But now it is all about pay and rations, regardless of the fact that they are preventing other people from earning their pay and rations.
No, very good point, Adam. When it comes to Starmer, it's very difficult to trust him when he says he's moving away from that agenda at all, given the fact that he was in Corbyn's front bench and he fully embraced the manifesto, including, by the way, when he was running to be Labour leader.
Indeed, and it's that second point which I think produces a huge question mark around his moral courage. If he was running to be leader, he should have been very open about his agenda. I understand collective responsibility. I understand the constraints of being on the front bench. When you're actually running for leader and you're setting out your agenda and saying to your party, vote for me, this is what I'll do, then it is quite wrong to promote an agenda that you're not actually going to follow through. I mean, I think you would be terribly wrong to follow a Corbyn agenda through, but to have said that he would and then just cynically ditch it, no wonder he's got an awful lot of rebellion. And he can't control his MPs. They were out on the picket lines. You know, senior MPs were out on the picket lines, preventing people going to work and causing an awful lot of misery and distress. And probably also problems for people needing to get to hospital without conscience. Now, I don't think that was the Labour of the old days, but it's certainly Labour now.
Indeed. And then, Anne, we get to possibly the most important issue, and that's Brexit. And we saw Sadiq Khan this week, a senior Labour figure, the current Labour Mayor of London, who claims that he supports Starmer, actually come out and say what they all secretly think, Adam, what they all secretly say at their Islington dinner parties, that leaving the EU was the biggest act of self-harm in history, and that he wants back into the single market. And let's be honest, that is what Starmer actually thinks, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that is what he thinks. It's very difficult to proclaim what he thinks because he thinks different things at different times, according as it suits the agenda or the ambition of the time. Yes, I think that is what he thinks, but the ball for that is very firmly in Boris's court. Boris could take enormous advantage of Brexit. He could scrap VAT on fuel, and nobody, as I've observed before, is going to want to vote to put it back again. So that on its own would, turn people against reopening the Brexit question. What is the matter with Boris?
Yeah, and of course, Anne, you're someone who left the Tory party over your desire to see Brexit properly delivered. And I actually think you're right, Anne. I think, look, if the British public genuinely know that there is a risk of the biggest democratic mandate in our history being overturned at the next election, it's a good thing for the Tories. It will get their base to rally around. It will get the red wall to think twice. And when you think about Starmer being propped up by the EU-loving Lib Dems and the SNP and the Greens, I mean, I can't come to any other conclusion, Anne.
No, but I think that because of the personal campaign against Boris, the Tories, if they entered a general election soon, would be very weak indeed. And that's why I say the ball is in Boris's court. He's still got 2 years. Now, he can still do a tremendous amount that people will not want to reverse and will not want to risk by closer ties with the EU. Also, I think the electorate is weary. It's weary of the Brexit argument. We've had it. It's over. It's supposedly done, though we all know it's not. It's supposedly done. And let's just get on with it. And I wish Boris would get on with it. He's not taking any advantage of Brexit. Yes, he says, it's a bonfire of regulations here. But when you actually put that against what he could be doing, big, bold measures, and he just funks it every time.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice, Anne. I think he should take advantage of the Brexit dividend too. Anne Widdecombe, thank you so much. We will speak next week. But coming up, as the Westminster witch hunt continues, is the PM's future now in the hands of a kangaroo court led by Labour grandee Harriet Harman? We'll debate that in the Media Buzz at 10, and we'll have the first newspaper front page as soon as they arrive then too. But first, as Meghan makes another bid to enter US Liberal politics, should Buckingham Palace be forced to release the results of her buried bullying probe? I'll discuss that next with P. Diner, the American royal YouTuber who is an outspoken critic of the Sussexes. Plus, I'll reveal what happened when she and one of my producers were confronted by a Meghan fan in a fiery public clash on the train. Honestly, you're really going to want to see this. This footage is extraordinary. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages coming up, but now time for The Outsider. In what's been viewed as an olive branch, Buckingham Palace has made the extraordinary and I think unconscionable decision, actually, to bury the probe into Meghan Markle's alleged bullying of royal staff. The Queen's aides confirmed the palace has revised its HR policies following the investigation into the behaviour of the Duchess during a so-called toxic period between late 2018 and early 2020. However, those findings, well, we're never going to be told about them. They will never be made public. While lawyers for the Sussexes denied allegations of bullying and blamed a smear campaign, the absence of answers debatably leaves a real question mark over Meghan's integrity, which will neither satisfy her fans, who hope she'd be vindicated, or her critics, including my next guest, the American royal YouTube star and fellow actress P. Diner. Now, there is one particular reason I've been desperate to get P. Diner on the show. After arranging to meet her friend and confidant Thomas Markle in the UK during the Jubilee, a plan sadly scuppered by his devastating stroke, P. Diner, whose real name is Patricia Dumitru, had a coincidental and ultimately extraordinary meeting with my producer Ben Leo on a London-bound train following her visit to royal writer Lady Colin Campbell. So after asking Ben to answer some questions on the royals for her YouTube channel, a Meghan-supporting member of the public butted into their interview and sparked an all-out row on the train. You're not going to believe this. Watch.
Hi everyone, so I'm here on the train. I just left Lady C's and heading back to the airport now, and we ran into the producer of the Dan Wootton show.
And well, what about the accusations about the Brits being racist? What did you think about Meghan making that accusation?
That's not absolute nonsense. We described her and the marriage as magical, described her as beautiful. We celebrated the diversity.
I think she wanted to leave from the very beginning.
Well, if you look at her history of sort of social climbing and whatever else, yeah, it would make sense to me.
You should really think about some of the language that you're using. Social climbing.
Sorry.
I found your language.
Then you can leave, lady.
Can I?
I'm not leaving.
Can I?
I'm not leaving. I'm just letting you know.
Don't come over here telling me what I need to do because you're offended.
I'm not telling you what you need to do.
Yes, you just told me what I need to do.
I'm sitting here.
I need to watch my language, is what you said.
She's dealing with sensual.
Look, man, we're
of arcane.
Well, she should have never married into the family.
Why can't she?
Look at this Sun front page from the day she was married. History. Harry and Meg's historic change for monarchy. Get that on camera. The Daily Mail showbiz editor.
Successful woman.
Nothing to do with her being African.
Of any colour. Any woman.
What's me calling her a social climb got her to do with her race?
Pejorative. It's a really nasty.
What are you talking about?
It's coming across as a victim.
Yes. You see people as victims. You're a victim of our language. You're getting offended for people having a conversation.
You're a victim of tabloid language. I think people are a victim. You're right there.
You would say that because you're a victim in chief.
Wow, I couldn't believe that, and I'm delighted to say that P. Diner joins me now from New York. I mean, Patricia, wow, there you are, conducting a really fascinating interview with our brilliant producer, Ben, on the train, and I thought it was really respectful. You're making all of these fascinating points. And that lady comes for you.
Yeah, I don't know why she thought she had the right to come into our conversation. We were actually being very respectful and just giving our opinions. I was asking questions, and she had been listening the whole time, and she just wanted to come over and have her 2 cents heard. I guess she was really offended by the things we said about Meghan. I don't know why someone feels they can do that.
Do you find it ironic, Patricia? Do you find it ironic when you have sort of a seemingly middle-class, white, British woman trying to talk to you about racism in America when you're a black woman. Is there an irony there?
Yeah, it is, because there's this thing we have in the States called a Karen. I don't know if you have it in the UK, but it's a big phenomenon in the state. There's a lot of women, middle-class white women, that tend to confront people who I believe they feel are of a lower class, and they want to interject their feelings and thoughts around things that they just don't like, and they feel they can come up and say these things. And at first I was like, well, wait a minute, am I in America? Or am I in the UK? Like, where am I at right now? I was really taken aback by it. And it was like my own personal Karen moment. And it was ironic that she felt so emboldened to come talk to me, a black woman, about such things. It's crazy. Why would you do that? Why do you feel you have that gutsiness about you to confront me? And, I'm a guest in your country, and she knew that.
Now, tell me, you have become an outspoken critic of Meghan, one of her biggest critics on the internet. You've gained a massive following as a result, and this friendship with her father, Thomas Markle. What is it about Meghan, Patricia, that you don't trust?
I think Meghan comes into this platform with false intentions, and she's trying to mimic this black persona to gain sympathy. And she can't possibly get this persona in an authentic way that she thinks is going to get her to where she wants to go, because it's false. It's not accurate. She has not walked in the shoes of a woman with a dark skin, but she wants to exploit that, and she wants to use that to help her brand. And it's an insult to Black people who go in this world every day with people who are unfortunately racist and have to deal with these things. Things have gotten a lot better, but she's trying to exploit something that causes real hurt and harm to real people, myself being one of them. Meghan can never walk into a room and be called the N-word, ever, never. I can. So how is it that she can take something like the race card and use it for herself, to brand herself, to enrich herself and her popularity, to be a victim, and not really be an issue she deals with? It's insulting, and it's wrong to do, and she should be called out for it, because that pain that I feel and others, even other women who are even darker than myself, go through even more pain because of their dark skin. And she exploits it like it's a game. It's something that she can toy with for the sake of her branding. And she's never claimed to be Black, ever.
And it is a game for her.
And now she wants to do that.
Yeah, it is a game for her, absolutely. And it's all about pursuing this political agenda. You know, she wants to run for politics. She wants to be a big Democratic politician. And on that note, P. Dinah, I wanted to ask you about this decision by Buckingham Palace to effectively cover up or bury, however you want to put it, this bullying probe into Meghan. There were so many rumours about the way that she treated her staff, and some of them were very serious. Are you shocked that these findings are never going to be released? They're never going to be made public?
Yeah, I was really hurt. It's like she gets away with so much. She can do things that are unimaginable to people and not pay the consequences for it. And that is giving the wrong message. She has to be taught that if you do certain things within your company, if you go against rules, guidelines, and you treat people a certain way, there are consequences to that. You should not get away with that. And I believe it's also a sacrifice, it's a slap in the face to the people who had these allegations, because apparently they will not know these outcomes either. They're not going to know.
No one will know.
I know if I went to HR and they, said, okay, we're not going to release the findings, I'm going to be like, well, what? Like, what are you talking about? I mean,
I know. All I can hope is that someone brave leaks these findings. That's what I want to happen, and I think that's what needs to happen. But Patricia Demetro, a.k.a. P. Dinah, I love your work. Thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as Labour Grande Dame and Boris critic Harriet Harman is elected chair and anonymous evidence is permitted, is the Privileges Committee proving to be a kangaroo court against the PM? I'll debate the Westminster witch hunt next with my superstar panel, the Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. Weeks after sharing his story on my show, brave Scotsman Alex Mitchell, who developed blood clots so severe after the AstraZeneca jab he was forced to have his leg amputated, has been awarded a government payout in a landmark victory for victims of vaccine damage. But how do we win justice for those still suffering in silence? Alex joins me for a very important Uncancelled tonight at 10:40. As a Tory MP rails against extreme sex education, including claims of children as young as 6 being taught about masturbation, do parents have a right to know what the hell is going on in their classroom? Veteran broadcaster and columnist Dame Jenny Murray says absolutely she'll be here at 10:15. Plus, should the co-creator of Friends have apologised for the hit show's lack of diversity?
It took me a long time to begin to understand how I internalized systemic racism.
And after an Australian critic slams our Emma Raducanu's muted reaction to losing Wimbledon, is it fair to accuse Gen Z of being content with failure? We'll delve into all of that in the media buzz throughout the hour. Tomorrow's newspapers on the way next too, and I'll crown my final greatest Briton and Union Jackass of the week before the night is out, so do not go anywhere. But first, the news with Tamsin Roberts.
Dan, thank you, and good evening from the GB newsroom. The government's Deputy Chief Whip has resigned following a drunken incident. In a letter to the Prime Minister, Christopher Pincher said, "Last night I drank far too much. I've embarrassed myself." And he went on to say that he embarrassed himself and others, which is the last thing I want to do. And for that, I apologise to you and those concerned. I think the right thing to do in the circumstances is for me to resign. I owe it to you and the people I've caused upset to do this. The Prime Minister has promised to increase defence spending by £55 billion for the rest of the decade in response to the threat posed by Russia. The UK also announced an extra £1 billion in military aid to help Ukraine. Speaking on the last day of the NATO summit, Mr Johnson said we need to explode the myth that the alliance has provoked the conflict.
If you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
Meanwhile, NATO's chief Jens Stoltenberg said the move to boost troop numbers in Eastern Europe will ensure Vladimir Putin doesn't miscalculate NATO's readiness to respond.
We also know that this can get worse, because if this becomes a full-scale war between Russia and NATO, then we'll see suffering, damage, death, destruction at a scale which is much, much worse than what we see in Ukraine today.
A 14-year-old boy who has been sentenced to 15 years in prison for murdering his stepbrother has been named as Craig Mulligan. 5-year-old Logan Mwangi's body was found in the River Ogmore in Bridgend in July last year. His mother, Ankarad Williamson, and stepfather John Cole were also found guilty and jailed for life. They'll serve minimum terms of 28 and 29 years, respectively. Detective Inspector Leanne Rees says the sentences have delivered justice for Logan's father.
It is incomprehensible that Logan had his life cut short in such tragic circumstances at the hands of those very people who should have been there to protect him. For Logan's father, Ben, who stands beside me, today's sentences are welcome news. However, no amount of justice can bring Logan back.
Airline passengers have hit out at the total chaos at Heathrow Airport after the airport ordered 30 flights to be cancelled during the morning peak. The rare schedule intervention came as the airport struggled with passenger numbers, with some travellers only finding out their flights were cancelled when they arrived at the airport. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked on alternative flights. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our Media Buzz. And let's kick off with the very first look at a front page, hot off the press, just one in so far. It's the newspaper. And it's an interview with former Prime Minister Theresa May urging her successor Boris Johnson to ban transgender conversion therapy, admitting she regretted her own opposition to LGBT equality earlier in her career. May told the PM, just because an issue is controversial, that doesn't mean we can avoid addressing it. My superstar panel back with me now, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. Now, the inquiry into whether Boris Johnson lied to Parliament over Partygate has begun, but there are serious questions about whether the PM will get a fair hearing. The investigation is being spearheaded by former Labour Minister Harriet Harman, whose appointment as chairman of the House of Commons Privileges Committee raised eyebrows yesterday for very good reason. Remember, Harman has openly branded Boris a liar on several occasions. But the blatantly biased Labour grandee now holds the Prime Minister's fate in her hands. Downing Street sources told the Daily Telegraph that the opposition-led committee risks becoming a kangaroo court, especially after MPs ruled that all witnesses will be granted anonymity. Boris allies accused the committee of relying on hearsay evidence, which the PM is unable to challenge, and question the integrity of the investigation. There's also real alarm tonight that the Privileges Committee's call for evidence only refers to whether Boris misled the House, mirroring Labour's April 21st motion, not whether he did so deliberately. There's a big difference here. The Ministerial Code, which is what the PM is accused of being in breach of, states ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation to the Prime Minister. So it looks like the burden of proof has just been lowered significantly, and it disregards the very code that he's actually been held to account to. So it seems like to hell with a fair trial, right? No wonder Boris's team reportedly think he should lawyer up. This is proving to be yet another Westminster witch hunt. Sean Bailey, kangaroo court here to potentially decide Boris Johnson's future.
100%. But let's quickly go to the technicals. If they ask a different question to which the Privilege Committee's rules adhere, then they can't expect the PM to stand down. So
exactly, that's what I was
yeah. So for me, it seems a moot point. But actually, what they're really trying to do is damage the PM. I said it before. They cannot beat Boris electorally. If it comes down to who has the best policies, who has the country's best interests at heart, they'll lose.
But Sean, isn't the issue the 1922 committee though? Because Boris won't stand down. But if the Privileges Committee find against Boris, it's possible that the 1922 committee will rewrite the rules, which allows another vote.
But again, all of these things, they're ifs and buts, but right here, right just now, the Privilege Committee should have its own professional pride and ask the question that it was set up to ask. And I think that's a problem. And also, as well, if we're going to have a political system that can't have rules, it's so politically biased, it's so pushed, you'll just polarise the country. And I'd argue that in many cases, because this has been such a deliberate witch hunt, people are now sort of being argued back round to supporting Boris because they say enough is enough. If you're going to manipulate the rules, how's he meant to operate anyway?
There's no way that someone who previously called the Prime Minister a liar should be chairing
Hang on a minute.
should be chairing an investigation into whether or not he misled Parliament, because then the result is basically, you know what the result is going to be. It's going to be pre-decided.
This is a kangaroo court, Amy Nicole.
Think about it. She's chairing the investigation and she's called him a liar, and it's about whether or not he lied.
The Privilege Committee is made up of all the political parties.
Yeah, and I agree with that, yeah.
And the fact that she said he is a liar, He's factually a liar. That's just
not true. That's the whole point of the investigation.
No. In the past, it's been proven that he is a liar. That is just a fact of this.
But we're talking about whether he misled Parliament.
She's chairing it. She's chairing it in a capacity where it will be complete. This is the fairest.
I'm sorry, that's not true.
Okay, well, I think this is all that all three of you are saying is setting this up for what it really is, which is a smear to make sure that the public opinion is against the verdict of this committee before it even happens.
I would agree with that. It does seem to be quite strategic. However, what doesn't make sense is surely the question that they're actually asking actually helps the Prime Minister, because even if he is found to have misled Parliament, in terms of the ministerial code, the question is, did he deliberately do
I think it helps in the sense that Boris Johnson might not feel the pressure to stand down. But actually, I think this is all going to come down to the 1922 committee. And you know, Sean, within your own party, there's a big movement now against Boris Johnson in certain quarters. And that's why I think this Privileges Committee has got to be fair. I think Christopher Hope in the Daily Telegraph has done brilliant work reporting on this. We're talking about it on this show. But, Sean, what's fascinating to me, nowhere else in the media is even looking into this Privileges Committee. But you know, if they come up with a result that is against Boris Johnson, they will immediately leap on it and say that it means he should go. And to me, this doesn't look like a fair setup.
Look, what would be a fair setup then? Sorry.
For first off, someone who hadn't preordained what the answer is going to be. You know, if you really believe in a parliamentary system, if you really believe in this committee, you have to give it some professional basis. Anybody now can push back against this decision because of the way it was set.
And also, Dominic, my issue with the anonymous evidence in this case, we are talking about whether a Prime Minister remains in their job. This is how important this committee is. Mm-hmm. The anonymous evidence, I think, is a massive issue because, let's be honest, if it's Dominic Cummings giving evidence anonymously, we know his hatred towards Boris Johnson.
I would tend to agree. I think that if you're going to make allegations and accusations, you should be man enough and have the balls to put your name to your
especially Amy Nicol, if you want a Prime Minister to go, I just feel it's disgusting, Amy, that we are going to have this massive investigation. We're not going to know who is making these claims against the Prime Minister. We're not going to know what their agenda is. And I think that is wrong.
But we know 2 from Labour, 2 from Conservative.
No, but I'm talking about the people who are giving the evidence. They are going to be granted anonymity.
Well, exactly. And that's exactly what they deserve, to be able to give the candid information.
No, I'm sorry,
but we don't know. But Amy, do you not see what I'm saying? We don't know if they have a personal agenda against the PM like Dominic Cummings does.
Everyone has some level which is going to, create a difficulty to be completely impartial. But if you think about...
I mean, if you were giving evidence anonymously, I wouldn't believe what you're saying.
You were quite happy for Sue Gray to do her report. That was fine. Nobody questioned that.
No, I thought the whole thing was a complete waste of time. When did you think I was happy with that?
And also, it was different.
The integrity of the report was never questioned.
She was investigating her own stuff. No, it isn't.
This is absolutely fairer. You've got a cross-section of politicians who are going to make the final say.
Amy's missing the point here. It means, look, the basic tenets of British law, innocent until proven guilty, because, of course, the PM, the verdict could be innocent. And secondly, you get the right to face your accuser.
And no one can give evidence anonymously in British courts unless you're a victim of a sexual crime, which obviously is
minor.
Who really cares? Because this is just the cherry on top of a cake. He's established liar. He's been absolutely awful. And this is literally just a straw that might break the camel's back, but won't, because it's unbreakable.
If we're going to talk about established liar, let's talk about Keir Starmer and Partygate.
Oh, God.
Well, hopefully we might have news on that next week. But look, let's move on. So no one told Friends co-creator Marsha Kaufman that life was going to be this way. So good. 28 years after launching the world's most successful sitcom, she would be forced to apologise for the lack of diversity in her otherwise beloved creation. Despite being one of the most popular shows on streaming with Gen Z, Friends has faced accusations of body shaming and homophobia when viewed through a 2022 lens, with the depiction of a mostly white New York City also coming under fire. It's also worth noting the first black recurring character wasn't introduced until the 9th and penultimate season. Addressing the backlash, TV exec Marta told the LA Times, "I've learned a lot in the last 20 years. Admitting and accepting guilt is not easy. It's painful. looking at yourself in the mirror. I'm embarrassed that I didn't know better 25 years ago. The interesting thing is Marta pushed back against the accusation for years, calling them difficult and frustrating. But in a sign, she's been paying far too much attention to the woke-topians simultaneously complaining about and devouring friends. She's had a change of heart. Here she is, buying into the concept of unconscious bias while donating the equivalent of £3.2 million to African-American studies at her old university.
It took me a long time to begin to understand how I internalized systemic racism. And I've been working really, really hard to become an ally, anti-racist. And this seemed to me to be a way that I could participate in the conversation from a white woman's perspective.
Dominique Samuel, should she be apologising for a TV show she made in the 90s? It's as if she's murdered someone.
This is what white liberals like her do. It's the hand-wringing. It's the, oh, I'm so sorry, black people, please like me now. I don't want that from you. It's patronising and it's, quite frankly, nonsensical. And if we're being honest here, if she plopped a token black person into the group that makes Friends, it would be completely transparent and everybody would be able to see through it. We don't need forced representation, especially when it comes to the USA, which is over 70% white anyway. It's not entirely surprising that a group comprising of mostly white people, a friendship group, exists.
And
so why the hand-wringing?
Sean, every now and then, you know, you do get a group of 6 friends and they happen to be one racial group.
I think the substantial thing here, people need to ask themselves, does Friends do any damage? Friends is a comedy about a group of people. Yes, it is devoid of black people, but it wasn't after black people. It wasn't creating a problem. And I think that's what people need to look at. And there's a deeper thing here. What is this really about? It's about white liberals, you know, lots of money, really rich, feel a bit guilty about that, covering themselves in some glory. And it's actually about people dismantling the Western world. Because if you're going to apologise for Friends, let's try Doctor Who. Doctor Who only recently became...
That's far gone,
but that only became woke recently. It's a very old programme. Well, let's try Star Wars. I don't know.
It's like you'd apologise for everything.
Absolutely everything.
Amy Nicole, was she right to apologise?
As the white liberal on the panel.
And how convenient!
Can I just say, I think the spa music was slightly... It was a lot, wasn't it? But I think there is some truth to what she's saying. I think it's nice because undoubtedly we can learn from the mistakes of the past. That's what's going to shape.
But was it a mistake? What was the mistake?
No, but what's to say, you know, you couldn't have had Friends with an all-black cast. There's a problem with diversity.
That happens. I mean, honestly, I go to America and I watch shows like The Real that has 6 black women all sitting around a panel together. They made an all-black version of Steel Magnolias. I mean,
or even BET, Black Entertainment Television. There's plenty of sitcoms that feature basically...
And by the way, in the 90s, because they were some of my favourite shows, I watched shows like Moesha and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which featured all black casts. So I just find it really difficult that she's almost having to admit she's racist because she created Friends, which had 6 white characters.
I think
you're saying there's something wrong in
I think it's just... it is a point that everyone watching television deserves to see themselves represented.
No, they don't.
I think it's...
In every show.
I think it's really...
So in every show we need to have a trans person. In every show we need to have a drag queen who's now a drag queen in EastEnders, by the way.
This idea that every single piece of television needs to have some sort of political message shoved inside of it is deliberately designed to suck the creativity out of every single thing. And that's why the phrase... go woke, go broke exists. So when you do that, people decide not to.
Final word, Sean.
We need to go the other way. She used the word ally. Just include black people in a realistic sense.
No,
you can't just shoehorn people into places. It actually becomes offensive.
No, but that's tokenism.
Black people have an experience. If you're going to talk about that experience, do it authentically or don't.
Yeah, and I think she's just saying she wants to do it authentically.
And I don't want an ally, thank you. I don't even know you. I don't want you to be my ally.
Dominique Samuel, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, thank you for that little clap, by the way. It was very important.
Can we do it again?
Yes, there we go. Coming up, after an Australian critic slams our very own Emma Raducanu's muted reaction to losing Wimbledon, is it fair to accuse Gen Z of being content with failure? I'll be holding centre court with my superstar panel as the Media Buzz continues at 10:30. But first, as a Tory MP rails against claims of children as young As 5 being taught about masturbation, do parents have a right to know what the hell is going on in sex ed classes? Veteran broadcaster and columnist Dame Jenny Murray says absolutely. She's here after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, schools are supposed to be safe places of learning, but chilling reports reveal kids are being indoctrinated with extreme lessons on race, sex and identity. MPs debated the issue in Westminster today, with Conservative MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, Miriam Cates, front and centre, with her harrowing findings. A biology teacher herself, she outlined how children are being taught a wide range of sexual positions, including rough sex, spanking and choking. One distraught constituent even detailed how her 6-year-old had been taught about masturbation in the classroom. The MP's disgust led to this extraordinary exchange on the BBC.
Unfortunately, Joe, I can't actually tell you about them because of your broadcast rules. They are not suitable to be read out on your programme. And I think that's the problem, because they are given to young children. And some of them, which I will describe in the debate, because obviously our rules in Parliament are different, describe quite extreme sexual acts and adult sexual concerns to really quite young children.
Well, another person who is using her platform to expose the shocking materials being taught in schools is journalist, broadcaster and Star Daily Mail columnist Dame Jenny Murray. In her latest column, she documents how parent Claire Page became worried about the way her daughter was talking about white privilege and gender, so requested lesson plans. She was shut down by the East London school, however, and told that the materials were, quote, commercially sensitive. And Dame Jenny wrote, "What's happening here is the politicisation of the curriculum." And Dame Jenny Murray joins me now. This was such a fascinating column. I mean, what is going on in our schools? And by the way, what do they have to hide?
Exactly. Well, I think I know what they have to hide. I think in a lot of these cases, and I don't think this school is the only school that has this kind of problem. I think what's happened is that organisations have been brought in. The commercialisation that was referred to in, oh, no, it's commercially sensitive. You know, we can't... What does
that mean?
We can't reveal. I think it means that they are paying organisations to come in, and I have my suspicions about which organisations they might be. Stonewall, I suspect, is one.
Or at least
Mermaids
Stonewall
might be,
affiliated organisations,
those, you know, people with those kind of views who are being paid to come in and do sex education. And there was I don't know who would have been doing race, but, you know, certainly there was a lot of really quite disturbing stuff going on the race question, where children were shown posters of black and white people stabbing each other and then asked to make posters of their own, which they did, and they were very violent, and they had some... Well, one of them said the Prime Minister is a liar, was it, their strap. That's, you know, highly politicised stuff. So the mother in this case got very worried about her daughter starting to think, oh my goodness, have I got white privilege? Is that wrong? Apparently her race had never been referred to before in a school that was primarily black and mixed race kids. Nobody had ever referred to her whiteness before. Suddenly they started to refer to it, so the mother got very worried about that. Well, could we see the lesson plans? Oh, no, it's not your right to see the lesson plan. And of course, it's true, the schools are not forced to give those plans out. On the gender question, which, as you know, because we've talked about it before, is something that worries me a lot. You know, I thought, hang on, if my kid was in school and came home and said to me, oh, did you know there were 48 different genders? I'd say, no, love, sorry, that's wrong. The school has got it wrong. So are children being taught things that have no basis in fact?
But we know they
That's
are.
Really scary.
I mean, what Mary-Anne Cates was just talking about, I mean, that is extreme sexual detail being presented to 6-year-olds, Jenny.
I know. It's outrageous, isn't it? I mean, some people would say, oh, come on, you're a bit old, you're a bit old-fashioned, you know, in what you think. And actually, no, I am not. You know, a 6-year-old child should not be being taught nonsense like that. Why do they need to know it?
And of course...
all they need to be told is if they've been playing around in the playground and some boy's put his hand up some girl's skirt, no, you don't do that. You know, your body is your own and you look after it and you don't interfere with anybody else's body. That's all
and no
they
one
need.
must touch you and report it if you do, especially if the person is an adult.
That's all they
obviously.
need to know at that age. But masturbation, I mean, come on,
and
6-year-olds?
Well, and even when sex education is happening for older children too, surely it is a parental right to know what sex education is being taught, because for some parents, that is something that they want to educate their children on themselves.
You know, you are allowed as a parent, it is perfectly legal, to ask for your child to be removed from certain lessons. If you have a different religion from the one that you think is being taught in the school, then you can withdraw your child from that. Equally, you can from sex education. I mean, I think it's a great pity if, in the case of the school that I was writing about, 13, 14-year-olds are being withdrawn from sex education because actually they need it. Yeah. They need to know these things, but they need it to be taught biologically and sensibly and within certain parameters.
Yeah, and without this far-left woke politicisation of it.
Even 13 and 14-year-olds don't need to be told about masturbation. Some of the boys probably know already. Actually, some of the girls might too. But, you know, you have to be really, really careful that it's age-appropriate and it's based in biological fact. That's what worries me, because I see the figures on particularly girls wanting to transition are rising and rising and rising. Where is that coming from? Is that coming from schools teaching? Oh, yes, you know, there are lots of different genders, not teaching them the difference between sex and gender, which is terribly important. And I am so frightened that kids are being encouraged or allowed or enabled to go down a road that may well be very, very dangerous for them.
Well, of course, and we know that they are, because I have had on this very show people who have been indoctrinated are actually lesbian women who were given the wrong sort of encouragement, I would say, at an early age. As a teenager, they found the concept of transitioning at that point much easier. And then once they're in their early 20s, when their hormones have settled down, they've realised, actually, I'm a lesbian woman. Well, by that part, their body has been mutilated and it's too late. So while I completely agree, there has to be sex education, I think parents must have the right to know what sort of sex education is being taught in schools.
So do I. Across the board, parents should have access to the kind of things their children are being taught. I mean, one of the things I quoted in my column this morning, I was sent at the age of 4 because I desperately wanted to go to school. Most schools wouldn't take me until I was 5. I think my mother was quite glad to get rid of me into school, really, because I was a bit of a nuisance. And I went to a convent school. And my mother said, look, you know, the academic qualifications here are brilliant, the teaching is brilliant, but we prefer that she didn't take part in the religious lessons. And they said, yes, that's fine. So my mum sent me to Sunday school so that I got some religious training. But, you know, I remember friends of mine who were Roman Catholics going into classes and being told if they didn't behave themselves, they would burn in hell. And I remember thinking, at the age of 5, I'm glad nobody's telling me that I'm going to burn in hell. And then, you know, when I was trying to find a school for my kids, who are now far from kids, they're very, very grown up, but I wanted to find out what they were going to go to all-boys schools, which I would have preferred, really, that they went to a mixed school, but the schools that seemed very good were all boys. And I asked 3 headmasters about what they were going to do to make sure that the boys in the school were taught about the equality between the sexes and what their role was in relation to girls and women as they grew up. The first one clearly hadn't a clue what I was talking about and just looked at me utterly blankly. What's this woman on about? The second one said, oh, well, I do have a couple of ladies in the art department. Ladies didn't go down too well with me, nor the fact that they were only in the art department. Then the third one said, well, with the little ones, and this was 11, 12-year-olds, we'll be talking about housework and doing the dishes and what their role is in the family of, you know, taking part in domestic work. And then, you know, once they come up to the 5th and 6th form, well, then we'll be talking about consent, obviously, because, you know, if my boys are going to university, I want them to know what sexual consent is all about. He said, and then one of the other things I've done is I've appointed women into maths and physics because I want my boys to understand that women are not only good at English and art.
And so you were like, bingo.
And I said, yeah, this is the school for my...
And I think that is the perfect illustration of why parents cannot lose control and why schools can't just railroad over parents' rights. And I think this is going to be a really big issue in the weeks and the months and the years to come, actually, parents starting to stand up against some of this indoctrination at schools.
We have to. You know, we trust the teachers to look after our children, prevent them being bullied, have discussions about the world they're growing up in, but do it sensibly and only talk to them about things that are based in fact.
And science too. Dame Jenny Murray.
And science.
Very good advice. Thank you so much. Great to see you again. Coming up, brave Scotsman Alex Mitchell developed blood clots so severe after the AstraZeneca jab he was forced to have his leg amputated. Now, after sharing his story on my show, he has been awarded a government payout in a landmark victory for vaccine damage victims. He joins me for a very important Uncancelled soon. But first, after an Australian critic slams Brit tennis ace Emma Raducanu's muted reaction to losing Wimbledon, have Gen Z become content with failure? My superstar panel weigh in on that in the Media Buzz next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. We've just got lots of newspaper front pages in now, so let's get straight to them. The Guardian leads with that news that Tory MP Chris Pincher, the Deputy Chief Whip, has resigned following reports he groped two men in a private club. The Daily Telegraph leads with that same story. The MP for Tamworth said in a letter to the Prime Minister that he drank far too much at the event on Wednesday evening and had embarrassed myself and other people. Also pictured their new British Wimbledon hope, Kate Bolter, who dedicated a dramatic second-round victim to her late grandmother who died on Tuesday. That was a beautiful tribute, actually. The Sun also leads with that news regarding Chris Pincher. It's understood he will stay on as a Tory MP because he has admitted wrongdoing. I'm also, though, very taken by this news. Taylor Swift to marry her British boyfriend, Joe Alwyn. That's a great scoop. The Independent leads with Johnson's commitment to increase defence spending by as much as £55 billion. The Prime Minister's promised to hike spending to 2.5% of Britain's economic output by the end of the decade. Logan's teen murderer is the Metro headline, as the teenager who helped kill 5-year-old Logan Mwangi was unmasked as pure evil schoolboy Craig Mulligan. The 14-year-old was found guilty alongside his dad, John Cole, and Logan's mum, Angrawad Williamson, who was 31. Honestly, that story has just broken my heart today. And the Daily Star comically covers controversial comments from the former F1 boss, Bernie Ecclestone, who went on morning television to praise Vladimir Putin as an honourable man, despite his invasion of Ukraine. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel. Dominique Samuels is back alongside Sean Bailey and Amy Nakal. Now, Emma Raducanu, Britain's great tennis hope, crashed out of Wimbledon yesterday in a shock second-round defeat to Caroline Garcia. And while many were sad, and Emma herself seemed happy, smiling and waving to the crowds even as she left the court. And in her post-game press conference, she went further.
There's no pressure. Why is there any pressure? I'm still 19. It's a joke. I literally won a slam.
I don't have a big problem with that, but Australian Daily Mail columnist Mike Coleman, he was having none of it, calling Raducanu's attitude outrageous and writing, "So what if you bowed out with barely a whimper and walked off centre court smiling and waving in your $60,000 worth of Tiffany & Co. sponsored jewellery? It's all a joke, right? You said it yourself." Raducanu's attitude is a far cry from some of the great examples of sporting grit over the years, but hey, don't let us hold you up. You go collect your participation ribbon. Coleman calls this an example of the every kid gets a prize phenomenon, symptomatic of growing up in a culture of pampered Gen Zers, from swimmers to cyclists, relaxed about falling short of champion status. So, Dominique Samuels, you actually think, right, that Emma Raducanu isn't a good role model after that reaction.
Yeah, look, OK, you could read it and think she's a 19-year-old, you're being far too harsh, but since the Open, she's actually lost competitively 13 times. And then for her to have that attitude at Wimbledon, extremely flippant, I think she forgets that there are so many people out there who would kill to be in the position that she is in. It doesn't matter if you're 19. There are millions of kids out there who haven't had the time put into cultivating their talent, haven't had the money to actually explore that talent and would love to have that position. So for her to be so flippant, I do think it's a slap in the face, and I think it is reflective of this Gen Z culture where people of that generation don't feel as though they need to try. Just showing up is OK.
Amy Nicole, you think that attitude is sadistic? What do you mean?
I think the article, which I would implore everyone to read immediately because it was quite shocking, is absolutely ridiculous. Right, no pressure should be a mantra for life. We could all take heed from this attitude. If you think that's flippant, she's saying, if she was thinking about all that stuff you just said, that's not going to make her perform well on the court. It's also not going to make her perform mentally well in her life. Like, having no expectations is the key to happiness. That's what makes a happy life.
If you go through life with no expectations, you're never going to achieve.
And Sean Bailey, this is her job. This is her job. This is not a hobby. This is her job. She's paid big bucks to perform on the tennis
Look, for me, I'm ambivalent about it. She's 19-year-old. How many 19-year-olds are flippant?
Yeah, I'm with you.
But I do take Dominique's point that she's had a real opportunity here. But when I look at the kids, I do a lot around boxing. I see kids box all the time. I go and speak to them. When I look at the hunger in them, it reminds me that actually Dominique's got a point there, because these are kids who've been given an opportunity and they go for it. The only way you can go through life with this no-pressure thing is if you've got a big safety net of parents.
But she's got that.
Yeah, exactly. But most people don't have that. So actually, she should just be a little bit aware.
You're basically saying she can only have it if she's miserable afterwards. No. Ridiculous. No. The girl has achieved more she has the best record than any other player, bar Andy Murray, in the last 45 years. If anyone can say, you know what, no
but therein lies the problem. She's won one and she's top of the tree.
And all of a sudden you're untouchable, and she should be really, really careful.
But Dominique,
that crown can fall real fast.
Well, it can, but here's the issue, right? I think Emma Raducanu, and I'm one of these people, I'm not a big tennis fan. She's just so lovely. And she's so beautiful. Yay. And she's so sweet. And it's a bit like Anna Kournikova. Remember her? Now, she didn't really win anything after the first go, but she was just so lovely and we all loved her. So I think she probably does have a big future, but maybe not on the tennis court.
That's the bit that's annoying, Dan, is other people have to work so hard to get anything to happen. And she just
hang on a minute, whoa.
But look at Emma Raducanu, she's a superstar.
She hasn't worked really hard and she absolutely slugs her guts out to get there, but then she leaves the court and goes, fine, I did my best. And that's a really healthy way to be.
It's the woke-topian attitude which you love. Yeah. Now, at a time of crisis, you'd think the world's leaders would have more important things on the agenda than an international game of hot or not, but you'd be mistaken. You probably remember earlier this week, Western leaders, including Bojo and Trudeau, poked fun at Vladimir Putin for his macho image. Look.
Jackie talk. Can we just in the press box? Can we take our clothes off? Let's wait for the speaker. You just want to all have to show them we're tougher than Britain. Bare chest horseback ride. Oh, yes. Take off the show them our Pepsi.
Somewhat predictably, it didn't take long for Putin to hit back.
I don't know exactly how far they wanted to get undressed, above or below the waist, but I think either way it would be a disgusting sight. Recall Pushkin, who said, "One might be all about business, yet still take care of the beauty of one's nails." I certainly agree with that. One must have both body and spirit harmoniously developed, but to achieve the harmony, you must stop abusing alcohol and other bad habits and do sports.
I mean, am I living in a farce? Is this real life? I just sometimes... It's too much. Too much. My mind is blown by that. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominique Samuels, thank you so much. Stand by, because coming up is the Speaker of the House, a Greatest Britain or a Union Jackass contender. After sparking today's baby ban in the comments, I'll make my final choice soon. But first, brave Alex Mitchell developed blood clots so severe after the AstraZeneca jab, he lost his leg. Now, after sharing his story on my show, he's been awarded a big payout in a landmark victory for vaccine damage victims. He's going to join me in just a few seconds after a look at what's coming up on Monday's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as Nadine Dorries piles the pressure on sporting bodies to exclude trans athletes from women's events, is fairness finally about to be restored to British sport? Former Team GB runner Mara Yamauchi explains why she's not letting up on this campaign. Plus, we'll take a closer look at the vital COVID questions left unanswered, and there'll be unfiltered opinion from Neil Oliver and my superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the iNewspaper Benjamin Butworth, and political commentator and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda DeLucy. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, we've been shining a light on the tragic injuries and deaths caused by COVID vaccines for some time now, including the story of Alex Mitchell, who horrifically lost a leg after developing blood clots following the AstraZeneca jab last year. When we brought his plight to a national television audience 7 weeks ago, Alex was fighting hard to secure compensation for his life-changing injury, but feared it would be years before his case was even heard. But I'm delighted to reveal that following his appearance, the government has finally stumped up £120,000 for Alex through its vaccine damage payment scheme. He's believed to be the first living survivor of his specific COVID vaccine-induced condition to be granted the cash. This follows Vicky Spitt, the widow of Cumbrian musician Zion Spitt, who died after taking the AstraZeneca vaccine in May 2021, becoming the first person to receive a payout following high-profile appearances on Mark Stein's brilliant GB News show. She too received £120,000. Alex, so look, you were a fit and healthy scaffolder before losing your leg because of the jab. You thought you were simply doing the right thing, just as the government had asked. Does this payment score a line under your terrible ordeal, or how do we keep the momentum going for those vaccine victims whose stories haven't yet been shared?
If I'm honest, Dan, I believe that the payment is just, it's the fact that they've admitted causation and probability. You know, yeah, £120,000 is going to take some pressure off my wife, because obviously I've got a mortgage that's not going to go away, and I've got other debts because over the last year, it took me 10 months to get any benefits. So the money will take off my wife, but it won't make my life massively different.
No.
You know, I think it's only due that we should receive some sort of a support, and the amount would be an insult under any circumstances for the loss of a life or the loss of a limb. And that's the bit that, for me, more than anything, it's probability and causation. You know, it's acknowledgement that this is real. It's acknowledgement that we didn't make it up. It's acknowledgement that the government has finally accepted that there is a problem with these AstraZeneca, well, particularly the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Yeah, but for a long time, Alex, you were ignored.
Yes, for over a year. I'm not the only one. I think that's what's very common, is every single one of us, Vicky included, and all the other bereaved families have been ignored, gaslighted, and basically left to rot. So the fact that they've actually done something is an incredible bonus for us all. The acknowledgement that makes a massive difference to me personally. You know, it's a big thing. The money, it's secondary. It's not going to change my life. Nothing's going to give me my leg back.
No, I know. And it's unimaginable what you've been through. But I do also think your treatment over the past year and the treatment of many vaccine damage victims has been appalling, because you have been ignored, you have been gaslit, Do you think the tide is turning, Alex, though? Is there more acknowledgement for you coming?
I hope so. I feel that there is. We now know that there's at least 6 payments being made out. Okay. That's fantastic news. What I do have a thought was, you know, the people that lost a loved one, I do believe that they should be sorted first. I really do, because it doesn't make me feel any better knowing that there's families in a worse situation than myself financially because they've lost a loved one. And that impacts on them far more than it impacts on me. And I struggle with that one. Why not pay the bereaved out first? I'm not saying, you know, you could have left me another year. I couldn't afford another year, I'm not going to lie. But I think that they should have sorted the bereaved people first.
Well, I absolutely agree, but I just don't think any of you should have been waiting for a year. It is utterly, utterly outrageous. And Alex, I don't know about you, but I feel so angry that your stories have been ignored by most of the rest of the media.
Yeah, I think that the trauma of that is far worse in some cases of what we've been through. And I know that may sound ridiculous that I've lost a leg, that's a horrific thing. But the fact that, you know, you were ignored, you were denied, no one wanted to listen to you, it's a very lonely, dark place to be for some people. And we have lost people through this. And I suppose that, for me, more than anything, is that it gives us hope.
Yes, because now you can say categorically to the world, to anyone who asks, I lost my leg as a direct result of the AstraZeneca jab, and the government have acknowledged that and paid out. So psychologically, that must help at least a little bit, I guess.
Massively, to be honest with you, Dan, it's a massive boost for us because we've been screaming for some of us over a year. It's very demoralising and it put people down. But now we've got the hope that we can move forward. There is a road for us.
And what is that road, Alex? What is that road? Where do you want to take this next?
Well, the next stage is obviously there's a legal civil action for a class action for the fix. That's obviously in the process. Clearly for us, the fact that causation and probability has been admitted by the government and one department, how can they deny it when there's a class action for the exact same situation? So how long that takes, because we know that legal wheels go very slow, but it gives us massive hope and inspiration that there is an end to some of this.
Yeah.
Some of us will never end.
No.
Where I go from here, I think I generally will spend the rest of my life fighting causes like this because it's horrific. You know, we now know that there's over 2,500 claims for vaccine damage over the last 12 years. Let's sort these people out.
I know.
You know,
well, look, Alex Mitchell, we're going to be with you on this, so we will keep in touch and we will keep fighting for you and folk in your position. By the way, AstraZeneca, they didn't comment at all today on this, but a government spokesperson did. They said we are working through claims made by the vaccine damage payment schemes as quickly as possible with a team of caseworkers keeping claimants updated. Medical assessments are reviewed once the claimant has provided their full medical records, which can take time. All vaccines have undergone robust clinical trials and meet the UK medical regulators' strict standards of safety, effectiveness and quality. Time now to reveal today's greatest Briton uni and jackass. Dominique Samuels, your greatest Briton nominee.
You know, wish it was Alex Mitchell because I think what he's gone through has been absolutely horrific and I just commend him for staying strong. But I will say it's Sir Lindsay Hoyle for me today after he kick-started the process of actually investigating whether or not babies should be allowed.
Yes, and he says
in
no.
The House of Commons. After, obviously, the farce that Stella Creasy kicked off. And it's been ruled that, you know, no.
Okay.
Babies aren't allowed, and good, because...
OK, Sean Bailey, your nominee?
My greatest British nominee is the Great British High Street. Many of our high streets are in decline. They're an important part of our economy from Wigan to Kent. So go out this weekend and shop in your own high street.
And Amy, your nominee, quickly.
My nominee is my favourite First Lady of Politics, Jerry Halliwell of UK politics. It's Angela Rayner for her incredible performance at the Dispatch Box and being generally wonderful as ever.
Well, I'm going with Sean and the Great British High Street. Union Jackass time now. Dominique Samuels.
Boris Johnson for his stupid comments on toxic masculinity.
Sean Bailey.
Mine is the British Council for ranking us with countries such as Russia, etc., for poor human rights, and they're meant to be promoting the country. We've got to stop hating ourselves if we want to help the world prosper.
And Amy Nicole, your Union Jackass nominee?
It's Bernie Ecclestone for calling Vladimir Putin an honourable man.
I was actually in studio.
I think Amy might have it this week.
Could I?
I'm actually going to go, though, with Sean Bailey.
Oh, God, that's such a pick.
2 for 2.
No way.
Because shame on the British Council, Amy. They are here, as Sean says, they're here to promote us, for goodness sake. Anyway, fabulous superstar panel. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominique Samuels, thank you so much for your company. It's been so great to be back with you this week. I am back Monday at 9 p.m. Mark Dolan is here over the next 3 nights. Headliners is next, though. Good night.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. Friday brings more showers, more heavy showers as well. A bit more of a breeze blowing tomorrow, which means the showers will tend to move through a little faster. The showers at the moment are very slow moving. Not everywhere seeing them today, but the isobars are very well spaced. This weather front will approach and bring some wetter weather for the weekend. But for the time being, as I said, it's all about the showers, dodging those downpours, some slow-moving, heavy, thundery showers out there, creating some problems on the roads, a lot of spray and surface water. Easing from Wales and southwest England overnight, but some more heavy downpours likely over the Midlands and northeast England. Elsewhere, becoming mostly dry, temperatures 10 to 13 Celsius. The details for Friday. It's messy. We start with a lot of cloud and rain over northeast England, and we see more rain pushing into northeast Scotland and across the Northern Isles. Elsewhere, for many, it's a dry start tomorrow, but then look at that, the showers just get going, and again, they'll be heavy and perhaps thundery in places. With more of a breeze, they will move through. The main focus by the afternoon, eastern England, northeast Scotland, Wales, southern parts of England, southwest Scotland looking a little drier. Temperatures might squeak into the 20s between the showers across eastern England, but mostly we're in the high teens. And then that next weather system we saw earlier on will move into Northern Ireland on Friday evening. Heavy rain, gusty winds, and that then moves across Scotland and into England and Wales for the weekend. Some uncertainty about the exact timing of it, and it does look as if East Anglia and the southeast will stay dry on Saturday with decent spells of sunshine. But elsewhere, cloud and rain moving in, and it's followed by showers, certainly for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Wales and southwest England looking mostly dry on Saturday afternoon. Again, temperatures mostly only in the high teens, maybe into the low 20s with some sunny spells across the southeast. Sunshine and showers again on Sunday. Showers mostly in the north and the west, looking largely dry on Sunday across the south.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good